Welcome back. We're turning to events in Italy and more likely non-events in Italy as the coronavirus runs rapid in the country, and I'm delighted to be joined by Forza Italian football editor Conor Clancy. Conor, how are you?
I'm not too bad, thanks, from my self-isolation centre, as you put it. But yeah, it's okay.
How long have you been self-isolating for?
Do you know, it's actually quite difficult to work out in the north because we've had so many different things happening here in Parma. But officially, we're on 3 days, so since Saturday evening.
And how have you been spending that time?
Doing a lot of work, to be honest with you. I mean, I've had to leave to go to the supermarket. I currently have more food in than I've ever had in my life, just to avoid going outside whenever possible. But yeah, I've been quite busy between the Italian football and Spanish football sides of things.
What's the general atmosphere like when you actually go out? Are the streets completely empty, or what's it kind of like? Is it like a ghost town?
Not quite. It's similar enough to how it is in August here. So in a lot of the cities in the north of Italy, in August, everybody leaves because everything shuts down and everyone just goes to the south or to Sicily or somewhere else for holidays. So it's quite similar to that, just without the insufferable heat. But it is a strange atmosphere, I suppose. A lot of places are completely closed. Most places are restricting how many customers enter at any one time. So, like, you go to the supermarket and for some of them, you have to queue outside because there's a guy on the door operating a one in, one out situation. And then even in the queue, they're making people stand 2 meters apart. So there are little strange things, but generally speaking, it's just a little bit strange.
So the biggest news of the week until today, when we're recording this, was that all sport has been postponed across Italy. But now, breaking news today is that Roma attempted to travel to Sevilla to play in the Europa League this Thursday, and that game might not go ahead now because Roma were turned away at the airport.
Yeah, well, Spain have cancelled all flights in from Italy until I think it's the 25th of March. So that would suggest that game is in doubt. The Inter's tie with Getafe is probably going to follow a similar line as well. I know the Getafe president, Angel Torres, came out and kind of said, look, it's the right decision. We need to think about suspending this game or postponing it or doing something about it. There does seem to be a general realization, not only in Italy now, but everywhere, increasingly, that sport has to take the back foot here, and public health does need to be considered more than anything else.
And Atalanta were obviously playing Valencia last night through to the next round of the Champions League. I'm sure Andrea Agnelli is probably eating his words a little bit over the last couple of weeks with the way that Atalanta have proven themselves on the European circuit. But where do Serie A clubs feel that they stand now when it comes to European competition, if this is the case?
Nobody really knows, because there was that statement last week when the Italian Olympic Committee came out and not cancelled Serie A themselves, but requested that the government cancelled Serie A. And those questions were raised immediately. Well, what happens about the Champions League and what happens about the Europa League? Because Italy still have 3 teams in the Champions League and they've got Inter in the Europa League as well. But obviously the Italian Olympic Committee have no jurisdiction over UEFA competition. So nobody really knows what's going to happen in Europe. I think it's kind of uncertain everywhere. I'm sure the situation back in Ireland is the same. It's a little bit behind here. I think you're about 13 days behind what we've got happening, but no one really knows what's going to happen. It's very much going to be over to UEFA to make some sort of concrete decision, because they can't just wait for flights to be cancelled to then take action and then try and rearrange games. I think UEFA have to step up and make a call, particularly with the European Championship coming this summer as well.
Yeah, and you reported on the Atalanta game from your room in Italy. Were you at any of the games the week before in the open stadiums?
No, my last game was on the 22nd of February, Spal Juve. And then the following day I was due to go up to Atalanta Sassuolo, but that was the first of the batches of games that were postponed because of the virus. They then input a limit of 50 press members that included like photographers and everybody at games. So tried to go to Parma, Spal, but we were turned away like most people.
Okay, and most of these games are going behind closed doors, but that's not having the effect that they thought it might have, because we saw the crowd that were actually outside of the Valencia Atlanta game last night. And I think there's reports in France that the PSG Ultras want to turn up outside the stadium, and even last night I think they let 2,000 of them into the stadium as well. So what's the feeling amongst fans in the Serie A if these games are potentially going to go ahead in a few weeks' time? Are they still going to turn up at the stadiums regardless of whether they're going to be behind closed doors?
I don't think so. I think 2 weeks ago when the decision was initially said, look, games are going ahead behind closed doors, nobody really understood the severity of the situation. But we've gone from having, 2 deaths to having over 630 deaths in the space of 16 days. So people are now realising just how big this thing is. You saw Ciccio Caputo at the weekend for Sassuolo. He scored a goal and showed this little sign saying everything will be okay, stay at home. And there's the movement now on Twitter, Io sto a casa, which just means I'm at home. And everyone is encouraging everyone else to stay at home unless they need to go to the pharmacy or the supermarket, basically. So the realization has finally arrived that people need to treat this seriously. Yeah,
and obviously football is secondary, but there is a competition that has to end somehow. So have the Serie A given any indication on how it's going to be decided, who's going to be champions? Are they going to call it off and maybe play it in summer, or how are they going to plan to end the season and pick a champion or pick Champions League spots?
Well, it looks like the FIGC, so the Italian FA, are going to be responsible for making that call. And they came out yesterday, I think it was yesterday on Tuesday, with an idea that they would run playoffs. So there will be a Scudetto playoff and a relegation playoff. The Scudetto playoff being the 4 teams who are currently in the top 4. So Juventus, Lazio, Inter and Atalanta. And then the relegation playoff involving those teams down there. Personally, I'm not really sure where I sit on this, whether it should go. I don't think it should just be assigned to the current leader if the season does stop now. I think it's got to be either a playoff or for the title to go unassigned. But then if it goes unassigned, that throws up so many questions about what happens next season, especially with the relegation promotion situation between Serie A and Serie B. But yeah, I think as it stands, we've no football until the 3rd of April. That could well be extended further, and then with the season having to finish before the end of May, it doesn't look like a complete season is gonna go ahead. So I think the playoff system is currently the most appealing option.
Yeah, and you don't have to answer this if you don't know the answer, because I'm sure many people actually don't know the answer, but there are quite a few Slovakian players playing in the Serie A right now, and Ireland of course have a playoff clash coming up against them in a few weeks' time. Has there been any movement in and out of the country? Are the government allowing people who have slips to get in and out of the country, or do you know how that's going to work?
Officially, if you're a non-resident in Italy, you can still leave, but It's very much over to you to find a way to leave. And now with flights and things being cancelled, there are roadblocks and road checks happening as well. I do think it would be very, very difficult to actually get out of Italy right now. So I don't actually know the specifics, but yeah, I know that non-residents can still leave and there are roadblocks. So.
Okay, that's fair enough. And just finally, I know it seems a bit trivial now that the season's called off for such a serious disease, but just basing the season as it was in terms of the football, Atalanta are obviously the surprise team in the Serie A this year. They're the most exciting to watch as it is anyway. They're scoring the most goals. What's the story with AC Milan at the minute? Because I know they're in a bit of a crisis.
I'm a bit afraid to speak about Milan sometimes, given the backlash that you get on social media. But the latest is Zvonimir Boban, who had come in alongside Paolo Maldini, and they seemed to be doing a relatively okay job at rebuilding for the umpteenth time in the last decade. And even Gazidis then came in, and he's kind of upset everybody because Boban's been giving his marching orders. It looks as though Maldini will follow him out of the club, and with that, Zlatan Ibrahimovic's renewal is up in question because he very much came back because of the impact that those two had. They kind of twisted his arm and convinced him. If Ibrahimovic goes, then Gianluigi Donnarumma is likely to have his future questioned as well. They're both obviously represented by Mino Raiola, and Alessio Romagnoli, one of the better Italian centre halves, and one of the few bright things at Milan lately, is also recently decided to join Raiola's leadership. So he could probably find his way out as well. And then it's already going to be another summer of rebuilding for Milan, which they really can't afford, but that's the situation they've let themselves be in. So as positive as things can seem sometimes, when you see Theo Hernandez scoring, I don't know, what is it, 7 goals from fullback, and Ibrahimovic lifting everything, it could all go to pot again in the summer, and you have absolutely no faith that anyone at Milan knows what they are doing. And even Stefano Pioli, who came in and steadied the ship after Marco Giampaolo's disastrous start to the season, he's probably not going to be there next season either, because it looks like they're going to get Ralph Rangnick in as some sort of combination of coach and sporting director, which just seems to be a recipe for disaster there, and it should be entertaining one way or another.
Yeah, I saw a tweet about AC Milan's last decade, and it was just rebuilding written 10 times in a row.
Yeah.
It's amazing how far the club has actually fallen in the last 10 years. Outside of that, Lazio in good enough shape. What's happening in Napoli?
Oh my God. I mean, your guess is as good as mine. Napoli is a really difficult place to get any concrete information on, because the city, the club, everything, they kind of up the walls. And if you are not Napolitano, it can be quite difficult to actually get accredited to a game or to find out any information about them. But it just went really, really sour for Carlo Ancelotti at the club, which is strange given the impression that everybody has of Carlo. Him and Lorenzo Insigne were basically not even able to speak to each other by the end of his time there. Insigne being Napolitano himself, being the club captain, and being a really important figure for the fans. It got to the point where they couldn't even be in the same room. And that is an incredibly toxic situation to find yourself in, especially with one of the most influential players in your squad. He left, Gattuso came in, and it just looked like it was going to be more of the same. But they have steady things a little bit now. They've beaten Lazio, Inter and Juventus all this year, and they are now sixth, just 6 points behind Roma. So if the Serie A season does get back underway, you would fancy them to put Roma under some pressure, and who knows, maybe Atalanta as well. You never really know. But yeah, they could end the season with the Coppa Italia win, with an upset over Barcelona in the Champions League as well. So it does look like they're getting things back together.